Some throck at the bar was loudly bragging about how many humans he'd killed. Meanwhile, an actual human sat 3 tables away, quietly listening to every word. The fractured comet smelled like stale, recycled air, spilled synth alcohol, and the kind of bad decisions people pretend they don't regret. Which, if I'm being honest, was exactly why I liked the place. Name's Dornak. I've been around this galaxy long enough to learn that the best entertainment never costs credits. All it really asks for is a little time, and your full attention, especially spots like this. Station Xerxes 9 wasn't what anyone would call respectable. It floated in neutral space, which is just a polite way of saying no government wanted to admit it existed or take responsibility for the mess inside. The bar itself had clearly lived through better decades, maybe even better centuries. The lighting was low, not for mood, but because half the fixtures were busted and no one cared enough to fix them. The furniture didn't match, was bolted straight into the floor, and carried stains I made a point of not identifying. I was parked in my usual corner booth, slowly working through a glass of Gentari wine that tasted like battery acid mixed with poor life choices. My gray-blue skin blended right into the shadows, and my 3-fingered hands held the glass like I'd done it 1,000 times before. I'd stopped at Xerxes 9 to refuel my cargo ship and wrap up a few deals that were questionable at best. That's normal business for a merchant like me. But tonight? Tonight I wasn't here for profit. I was here for the show. And so far, it was shaping up to be a good one. Right in the middle of the bar, surrounded by a mixed crowd of species, sprawled Tharian the Fierce. At least that's what he called himself. Tharian was a throck, which meant he stood close to 8 feet tall, had 4 arms thick as support beams, and skin that looked like granite infused with pure hostility. His species had a reputation for being strong, aggressive, and not exactly thinkers. Tharian fit that reputation perfectly. He'd been holding court for over an hour, telling anyone dumb enough to listen about his so-called exploits. His voice rolled through the cantina like thunder, deep and heavy enough to rattle glasses on nearby tables. "And that's when I ripped the Kralix's spine clean out," he roared, swinging all 4 arms in an overdone display. The crowd reacted right on cue, gasping like they were supposed to. I rolled my eyes so hard I nearly checked my own brain for damage. It was shaping up to be a long night, but something about the air felt off. Charged. Electric, dangerous. I took another sip of my awful wine and leaned back. Tharian was just getting started, and the crowd was devouring every word like starving Plixians at a feeding station. "The Kralix was nothing," he bellowed, slamming a massive fist onto the table hard enough to make several patrons flinch. "Child's play compared to the Vorgath death beast I faced on Terminus 7. 20 feet of muscle and rage, teeth like vibroblades, acid for blood." He leaned forward, grinning. "Most hunters? They run. They hide. They die screaming." He paused, letting the silence stretch while his tiny eyes swept over the crowd. "But not Tharian. No, no, no." "I stood my ground," he continued, "stared that thing down, and when it charged, I grabbed it by the throat with my bare hands." A ripple of awe and disbelief rolled through the room. One small Chirix at the front actually fainted on the spot. Her companion had to drag her away. I snorted into my drink, grabbing a Vorgath death beast by the throat. Sure. And I was the Emperor of the Galactic Council. The Vorgath were extinct, had been for 300 years. Even when they were alive, they lived in underwater cave systems. Tharian would have drowned long before he got within 10 feet of one. But hey, I wasn't about to ruin a good lie with facts. "Now you know what the real challenge is," Tharian went on, lowering his voice into what he probably thought was a dramatic whisper. It still echoed across the entire bar. "Hunting deathworlders." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. A few patrons instinctively stepped back. One Calarian made a sign against evil with his tentacles. Deathworlders, the nightmares of known space. Species that evolved on planets so hostile, so absurdly lethal, that survival alone forged them into walking disasters. Crushing gravity, toxic air, mega-predators, extreme storms, worlds that should never have supported life at all, and yet they did, and that life came out angry. "Oh yes," Tharian said, grinning wide, "I've killed deathworlders." Plural. "More than I can count on these hands," he added, waving all 4 arms around. Considering Throx only had 3 fingers per hand, that meant he was claiming over 12 kills, which was laughable. "The Korvaxi from the methane swamps of Dread 9, he said. "The Threxian berserkers from the ice wastes of Frostheim, too." He leaned in closer. "And yes, my friends, even the humans from Earth." That did it. The bar went silent, and so did I. I straightened up in my booth. Humans. The most infamous deathworlders in the galaxy. Earth was classified as a Category 12 death world, about as bad as it got. The gravity alone crushed most species. The wildlife was insane. Even their microbes were hostile, and Tharian was claiming he'd killed them. 3 humans, he said, holding up 3 fingers. 3 separate encounters. They died like anything else. He smiled. Slow, confused, and very, very afraid. The crowd hung on every word, equal parts horrified and fascinated. Me? I was skeptical. Actually, no. I was calling total nonsense on the whole performance. Still, I kept watching. Because if there's one thing I've learned traveling the stars, it's this. Liars always get what's coming to them. And tonight felt like exactly that kind of night. That's when I noticed her. She was sitting 3 tables away from Tharian's little circus. Alone. Quietly sipping an amber liquid from a short glass. Human whiskey, if I had to guess. I'd dealt with enough humans over the years to recognize one, even in the dim lighting of the fractured comet. Lila Montrose. I'd learn her name later. Right then, she was just another customer. Except, she wasn't. She was human, and she was sitting right there. Barely 15 feet separated her from a bloated idiot loudly bragging about wiping out her entire species. Both of my hearts picked up the pace just a little. Yeah, this was about to get good. At first glance, Lila looked completely ordinary. Average human height, maybe 5.5 feet. Short dark hair, nothing flashy. She dressed practical, no nonsense at all. A plain gray jacket over a black shirt, cargo pants, and boots that had clearly seen real use. No visible weapons, which with humans doesn't mean a damn thing. They're creative like that. Her skin was light brown, and her face showed absolute calm. Too much calm. That was what hooked my attention. Everyone else in the bar was either hanging on Tharian's every word or pretending he didn't exist. Lila did neither. She sat there like a predator that had already mapped every exit, measured every threat, and decided none of it deserved her concern. She lifted her glass, took a slow, steady sip, and set it down without making a sound. Her dark, unreadable eyes flicked toward Tharian for half a second, then away. No fear, no anger, just acknowledgement. Like noticing a loud bird outside your window. Annoying, but not worth standing up for. "Another round for the great hunter," someone shouted, and fresh drinks hit Tharian's table. He laughed, that booming, self-satisfied laugh that made my teeth ache. Lila raised a single finger, catching the bartender's eye. He was a 6-armed Hexian and scuttled over fast. "Another," she said quietly. Her voice was low and steady, with an accent I couldn't quite pin down. Earth had hundreds of languages and more regional twists than I cared to count. The bartender nodded and refilled her glass without a word. She didn't look back at Tharian. Didn't need to. But I saw her jaw tighten, just slightly. Saw her fingers tap the table once. Twice. Oh yeah, this was definitely heading somewhere. I leaned forward in my booth, forgetting all about my wine. The show was about to start. Tharian, unfortunately, wasn't finished. Not even close. Like most idiots who mistake attention for respect, he decided to crank things up, bigger, louder, and much dumber. "You want to know the secret to killing humans?" he asked, leaning in like he was sharing forbidden wisdom. His voice still carried to every corner of the bar. "You gotta understand their weaknesses. They act tough, got the reputation and all. But I've studied them, hunted them. I know the truth." He tapped a thick finger against his head as if it contained wisdom instead of empty space. "First, their skin. Pathetic. Thin. Not armor, not scales. Soft. Fragile. One good slash and they bleed out in minutes. I've seen it." He made a slicing motion and grinned. "The first human I killed, male, big one too, thought he was scary. I opened his throat with a single claw. He dropped like a sack of grain. Gurgling, choking, grabbing at a wound he couldn't fix. Took maybe 2 minutes to die. Probably felt a lot longer to him." Several patrons looked like they might throw up. A Calarian stood up and hurried out, tentacles trembling. I glanced at Lila. She was completely still now. Her glass sat untouched. Her hands were flat on the table, fingers spread wide. From where I sat, I could see her breathing had changed. Slower, deeper, controlled. That was bad news. For Tharian, anyway. "The second one was female," Tharian continued, clearly enjoying himself. "She tried to run. Humans are decent runners on their home world. I'll give them that. But on a ship? In corridors? Nowhere to go? They panic." She kept looking back at me, terror in her eyes, making those little gasping sounds. I let her run, made it more fun. When I finally caught her, I held her down with my secondary arms and crushed her ribs one by one. He squeezed his fists together in a sick imitation. "Pop, pop, pop, like snapping twigs." She screamed at first. Then it got wet, bubbly. "Lungs filling with blood, you see. That's how you know you've done it right." Lila's left eye twitched. Just once. Barely noticeable. Unless you were watching for it. I was watching very closely now. "And the third," Tharian said, holding up 3 fingers again. "The third was the best. Another male. Had a weapon. Thought he was ready. Humans love their little guns and knives. But here's the thing. They rely on tools. Take those away and they're nothing. Soft. Weak. Helpless." He slammed his fist down again, rattling glasses across the bar. "I disarmed him in seconds. Literally. Ripped his arm clean off at the shoulder." More gasps. The look on his face when he realized he was already dead. Just hadn't caught up yet? Priceless. He tried to crawl away with his other arm, leaving a nice trail behind him. I followed, slowly. And when I finally finished him, I took his skull. Cleaned it myself, kept it for years, sold it to a collector on Outpost Gamma. Lila's hands curled into fists, slow, deliberate. Her knuckles went white. The bartender, who had been listening in growing horror, quietly backed away from her table. Pure instinct. Some part of his brain knew danger when it felt it. I knew exactly what was coming. Tharian had just made the worst mistake of his long, stupid life. He'd told his lies to someone who knew exactly how fake they were, and that someone looked ready to offer a live demonstration of real human lethality. Tharian scanned the room, soaking in the fear and fascination like a parasite. His eyes moved from face to face. Then they landed on Lila. Oh no. Oh yeah. This was about to go very, very wrong. "You there," he said, jabbing one massive finger in her direction. "The quiet one in the corner. You've been sitting there this whole time, not saying a word. What do you think, Impressed? Skeptical? Come on, say something." The bar fell silent. Every head turned toward Lila. She hadn't moved, hadn't shifted her posture, hadn't changed her expression. She just existed there, perfectly still in a way that should have set off alarms for anyone with half a brain. Tharian did not possess half a brain. "What's the matter?" he pressed, flashing a wider grin. "Scared?" Let me guess. You've heard stories about humans and now you're terrified, right? Don't worry, little one. I've already killed them all. You're safe with Tharian here. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. The tension in the room was thick enough to slice with a vibro blade. Lila moved at last, slowly, deliberately. She lifted her glass, took a long sip, set it back down with the same careful control, and finally looked straight at Tharian. No. Just one word. Her voice was calm, even pleasant. But there was something underneath it, cold, sharp, like a blade hidden behind a smile. Tharian blinked. No, he repeated. No what? No, I'm not impressed, Lila said, each word clean and precise. No, I'm not scared. And no, you did not kill 3 humans. The bar went from quiet to dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop in vacuum. Tharian's grin twitched, faltered, then snapped back into place, forced and ugly. Oh, he sneered. And how would you know, little creature? Were you there? Did you witness my hunts? I know, Lila said evenly, because I'm human. And everything you just said is complete and utter garbage. The silence shattered. Patrons scrambled backward, chairs screeched, drinks hit the floor. The Chirics who'd fainted earlier woke up just long enough to faint again. 3 different species bolted for the exits. The bartender dropped behind the bar with a crash. I didn't move an inch. My wine glass froze halfway to my mouth. This was better than anything credits could buy. Tharian stared at Lila, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. His forearms tensed, fists clenched. His eyes darted around, hunting for support, for validation, anything that said this was a joke. It wasn't. Lila stood up. She wasn't tall, not by his standards. She barely reached his chest, but the way she rose, the way she carried herself, made her feel 10 feet tall. So, she said, still calm, her voice now carrying clearly across the bar, would you like to know how I know you're lying? Because I can explain it, point by point, lie by lie. Or we can skip ahead to the part where you apologize and shut up. Tharian's face twisted with humiliation and rage. This was not ending well. For him. His skin cycled through several shades of purple before settling on something I can only describe as furious eggplant. All 4 fists clenched and unclenched as his breathing grew heavy and uneven. You dare, he growled, stepping toward her. You dare call Tharian a liar? I'm not calling you a liar, Lila replied pleasantly. I'm stating a demonstrable fact. You are a liar. Big difference. She stepped forward, completely unfazed by the 8-foot wall of angry muscle looming over her. Let's start with your first story, she said. The throat slash. She raised one finger. Human blood clots fast. We evolved that way because our planet is full of sharp things. A simple throat cut, unless you perfectly sever the carotid, which is harder than you think, won't kill someone in 2 minutes. We're stubborn, built to survive. Tharian opened his mouth to argue. Lila didn't let him. Second story. Crushing ribs until the lungs fill with blood. Dramatic, sure. But human ribs are flexible. They bend before they break. That's another survival trait. You'd need sustained crushing force for several minutes, not a quick squeeze. And even then, humans have survived worse. There are documented cases of people with fully collapsed lungs making it to hospitals alive. So unless you spent 10 uninterrupted minutes methodically crushing ribs while your victim politely didn't fight back, that story is nonsense. Someone in the crowd, a brave little Gentari like myself, whispered, She's right, you know. Tharian shot a murderous glare, but Lila was already moving on. And my personal favorite, number 3. She smiled now, thin and sharp. Tearing an arm off at the shoulder. Do you have any idea how much force that takes? Human tendons, ligaments, and connective tissue are absurdly strong, stronger than most species. Death world, high gravity, constant stress. You'd need around 10,000 pounds of force, applied at exactly the right angle, to traumatically amputate an arm. And even if you somehow managed that, shock would hit immediately. He wouldn't crawl anywhere. He'd be unconscious in seconds. She took another step forward. Tharian took one back. But here's the real giveaway, Lila said, lowering her voice. You said you kept the skull, cleaned it yourself, sold it on Outpost Gamma. Yes, Tharian snapped. So what? Outpost Gamma was destroyed 4 years ago during the Sector War, Lila said calmly. Everyone knows that. It doesn't exist anymore. So either you're a time traveler, or you're a bad liar who can't keep your own fake timeline straight. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed, and quickly tried to hide it. Tharian's face went past purple and into something approaching ultraviolet. All 4 of his hands trembled with rage. Furthermore, Lila continued, and I had to respect the sheer dedication she was showing in absolutely dismantling this idiot piece by piece. Humans don't travel alone in hostile space. We learned that lesson early. We move in groups, in ships with weapons, with communication networks. If you'd actually killed even 1 human, let alone 3, someone would have tracked you down by now. And trust me, you wouldn't be standing here bragging about it. You'd be a cautionary story, the kind whispered in bars about what happens when someone messes with deathworlders. She stepped right up to him then, standing directly in front of his towering frame. She looked up at him without even a hint of fear in her eyes. So here's what really happened, Tharian the Mighty. You heard a few stories. Maybe you saw a human once, from a safe distance, and you built this whole fantasy in your head because it made you feel important. Made you feel dangerous. But you're not dangerous. You're just loud. The silence that followed hit like a vacuum. Tharian's breathing sped up. His eyes went wild. Every muscle in his massive body coiled tight. I knew what was coming next. So did Lila. She was counting on it. Tharian did exactly what humiliated, cornered predators always do. He lashed out. "I'll show you dangerous!" he roared. One massive fist came crashing down toward Lila's head, carrying enough force to crack the floor. Lila wasn't there anymore. She'd already moved, smooth, fast, sliding left with a grace that looked almost casual. The fist obliterated the table she'd been standing beside. Wood exploded. Drinks and debris flew everywhere. "See?" Lila said calmly, circling him with steady, measured steps. "That's your first mistake. You telegraphed it. You pulled your arm back, shifted your weight, told me exactly what you were about to do. Against another Throck, maybe that works. You're all built like bricks. But humans?" She shrugged slightly. "We're persistence hunters. We read body language. We anticipate. We adapt." Tharian spun faster than something his size had any right to move and swung with 2 arms at once, trying to trap her between them. Lila dropped, low, impossibly low. Her legs folded in ways that made several species in the crowd visibly flinch. Both fists sailed inches above her head. She surged forward into his space, and her fist, small compared to his bulk, slammed into his solar plexus. The sound was wet and heavy, like a hammer hitting raw meat. Tharian's eyes bulged. All the air blasted out of his lungs in a single wheezing gasp. He stumbled backward, choking. "Technique over strength," Lila said evenly, resetting her stance. "We learned that early. Everything on our planet was bigger than us, stronger than us. More teeth, more claws. So we got smart. We learned where to hit, how to hit. Precision beats power." Pain didn't stop him. Rage took over. Tharian charged like a runaway transport, all 4 arms spread wide, trying to grab her, crush her, anything. Lila sidestepped, caught one of his arms, and turned his momentum against him. It was honestly beautiful. Pure physics, clean leverage. She twisted, planted her foot, and Tharian, all 8 feet and several hundred pounds of him, went airborne. He flipped over her hip and slammed into the bar hard enough to crack the wood. Bottles toppled, Glass shattered. The bartender made a sound like a dying engine. Judo, Lila said conversationally, like she was explaining a recipe. Japanese martial art. Been around for over a century. Uses an opponent's size and strength against them. Really helpful when you're smaller. Which on Earth we usually were. Tharian dragged himself up from the wreckage, blood running from a cut above his eye, breath coming in ragged bursts. Then he reached for his belt. A weapon. A curved blade caught the dim light. Oh, Lila said. Now we're using weapons. Her hand dipped into her jacket and came out holding something small and dark. A knife. Compact. Purpose-built. Fair enough. They circled. The crowd pressed back against the walls, forming a rough arena. No one was leaving now. This was too good, too awful, too fascinating. Tharian lunged, slashing wildly. Lila blocked with her forearm, her jacket sleeve reinforced with something that made the blade scrape harmlessly aside. In the same motion, her knife slipped into a narrow gap in his armored hide just above his primary right elbow. Not deep, just enough. A pressure point, a nerve cluster. Tharian screamed. His right arm went limp. The blade clattered to the floor. Anatomy, Lila said calmly. Thruks have 3 major nerve clusters in each arm. Hit the right one and the limb shuts down. Learned that from a medical database. She shrugged slightly. See? Humans study. We research. We prepare. Tharian swung wildly with his remaining arms now. Panic had taken over. Lila ducked, weaved, and drove a brutal kick into his knee. Something crunched. He collapsed hard, the impact shaking the entire cantina. Lila was on him instantly, knee on his chest, knife resting at his throat, not cutting, just resting there, a promise and a warning. Yield, she said quietly. Tharian stared up at her, panting, bleeding, broken, with wide, terrified eyes. I yield, he gasped. The cantina doors hissed open. Station security poured in. 6 armored guards with shock batons and rifles. A Vexian lieutenant took one look at the wreckage, the cowering crowd, and Tharian pinned to the floor by a human. He sighed. A deep, tired sigh from someone who absolutely did not get paid enough. Again? The lieutenant said, looking directly at Lila. Really? Lila stood, retracted her knife, and shrugged. He started it. The lieutenant gestured to his team. Medical, then holding. Assault, property damage, disturbing the peace. Standard charges. 2 guards hauled Tharian up. He didn't fight, just whimpered. Lila brushed off her jacket and walked calmly back to her table. Her drink was still there, untouched. The lieutenant watched her sit, shook his head, and muttered something under his breath about humans and death wishes. I couldn't have agreed more myself. After the guards hauled Tharian away and the rest of the patrons slowly, very cautiously, returned to their drinks and half-whispered conversations, I did something that was either impressively brave or incredibly stupid. I walked over to Lila's table. She looked up as I approached. Those dark eyes flicked over me in maybe half a second, measured me, decided I wasn't a threat, and then she nodded toward the empty chair across from her. Have a seat, she said. I sat down, probably faster than was dignified for a merchant of my supposed reputation. That was... I started, then stopped, searching for the right word. Educational. Lila snorted, a very human sound, and took a sip of her somehow still intact whiskey. Annoying, she corrected. I came here for a quiet drink, not an anatomy lecture. You knew exactly what he was, I said. A liar, a braggart. You could have just ignored him. I could have, she agreed. Then she added, but here's the thing, Dornak. She knew my name. Of course she did. She probably knew everyone's name in that bar. Guys like Tharian don't just lie, she continued. They spread fear. They make people think humans are easy prey, weak, huntable. And then some idiot believes it, tries it. And people die. She set her glass down with a soft click. Better to fix the record now, out loud, than let that kind of poison circulate. So you humiliated him, I said. I educated him, she corrected, a faint smile touching her lips. There's a difference. I leaned back, studying her more carefully now. You're military, I said. Former, Lila replied easily. United Earth Colonial Marines, 10th Division, 8 years, 3 tours. Frontier stations mostly, Kepler Fort, Orbital 2B during the contested zone conflicts. Honorable discharge 2 years ago. And now? Now I'm a freelance security consultant, she said, which is a fancy way of saying I get paid to make sure cargo ships don't get raided and diplomats don't get kidnapped. I was heading to a contract on Helix Station. Ship needed repairs. She gestured vaguely around us. So here I am, stuck on Xerxes 9 for 3 days, drinking overpriced whiskey, dealing with idiots. About Tharian, I said carefully. What happens to him now? Lila shrugged. Station security charges him. Fine. Maybe a few weeks in detention. Then he gets shipped back to Throck space with a warning on his record. He'll probably tell everyone he barely escaped a human assassin, turn it into another story. People like him always do. But, I said, he won't brag about killing humans anymore. Lila's eyes flashed, just a little. No, she agreed. He won't. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The bartender, braver than most, approached and refilled both our glasses without asking. Lila nodded in thanks. Can I ask you something? I said. Sure. That move you did, the one where you flipped him over your hip, you said it was judo. Yeah. Could you teach me that? Lila laughed. A real laugh. Warm, genuine, completely out of place in that dingy bar, and somehow perfect. Dornak, no offense, she said, but you've got 3 fingers and a totally different skeletal structure. It wouldn't work the same. Pity, I said. But, she added, pulling a small data chip from her pocket, I can give you this. She slid it across the table. Self-defense manual, adapted for low-gravity species. Written by a human, obviously, but field-tested on 12 different alien biologies. Consider it a gift, for being a good audience. I picked up the chip, genuinely surprised. Why? Because you didn't run, Lila said simply. You stayed, you watched, and you didn't judge. That counts. I slipped the chip into my pocket, carefully. Thank you. Lila raised her glass. To not being idiots. I lifted mine. To not being idiots. We drank. Much later, after Lila had left and I was back aboard my ship, prepping for departure, I did some digging, called in favors, accessed databases I technically shouldn't have been able to touch. Lila Montrose, 10th Division Colonial Marines, 3 tours, honorable discharge. What she hadn't mentioned were the commendations, the medals, the classified operations, or the fact that she once held a supply depot alone against a pirate raid for 14 hours, killing or capturing 27 hostiles before reinforcements arrived, or that she was on a government watch list, not as a criminal, as a person of extreme interest, the kind intelligence agencies keep tabs on because they're that skilled, that dangerous, that valuable. Lila Montrose wasn't just former military, she was a legend who preferred to drink alone, and Tharian the Mighty, braggart, liar, and fool, had picked a fight with her in a bar. I laughed all the way to the jump gate. Some lessons, you only learn them the hard way.